In this video, we're going to talk about the service key points, and we're going to talk about this from a technician perspective. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing I want to talk about is the first contact and the inspection. Now, when you first drive up to a customer's house and you go up and talk and interact with that customer, if that interaction is poor, then the customer will perceive the service as poor, regardless of how good of a job you do. And so when you go up and interact with the customer, your uniform and your demeanor and your look is extremely important. Make sure your shirt is tucked in. Make sure that you're as clean as you can be. I understand that as a technician you get a little dirty, but see if you can, brush off the dust if you can, and just make yourself as presentable as you can. You don't want to be disheveled. Then your communication with the customer needs to be very cordial and very friendly and also very confident. Remember, you're the expert. And so when you show up, you want to be obviously happy and cordial so that they enjoy their interaction with you. But you also want to be confident so that they feel that you, A, understand their problem, and that B, you can fix whatever problem. So you just want to be super, super duper confident. And you should be super confident because we give you lots of training and you have a lot of tools and products at your disposal, way more than they could ever hope to have on their own. So you can do a good job regardless of what kind of pest they are dealing with. Now, the second line here, the inspection. In order to do any treatment, to do a good job, you have to always first start with an inspection. Now, part of the inspection process is talking to the customer. So that first contact, what kind of bugs are you seeing? What issues have you been having? Last time I was here, I did this and this and this. How's that working? I know that you were having issues with ants. I treated the last time in the say the kitchen or the backyard. How have they been doing? Are they getting worse? Are they getting better? Those kinds of conversations are the starting point for any investigation. Then after you have that communication and that contact with the customer, then you want to go out and actually inspect the house. You may find things that they didn't know. So when you're walking around the house, they might be like, no, I don't have any issues. And you do a walk around and you're like, oh, there's a wasp nest, or oh, here's some spiders or whatever, just because they might not spend time on whatever portion of the house where you're seeing issues. And so you want to inspect it really quick. After the inspection, one of the most critical points of most treatments, probably 99%, maybe 95% of all treatments, is a foundation treatment. Now, the reason the foundation treatment is so critical is because almost the vast majority of pests that get into houses crawl. I understand that there's some that don't, like wasp, I get it, but most of them crawl. So spiders, crickets, roly-polies, ants, you name it, most of those crawl. And so this foundation barrier that goes this orange, on this diagram, this orange strip that goes around the house, if we do that foundation treatment really well, then any crawling bug has to cross that barrier in order to get inside the house. There's no other way, with the exception of like overhanging trees and things like that. But the exception of those, assuming that there's nothing overhanging on the house, then that foundation treatment is going to be a key point in the bulwark of defense that we're creating for that customer. Typically, we do about 3 feet up and 3 feet out. That's what our sales reps in our office is trained to tell people. So about 3 feet up and 3 feet out. And I understand we're not going to pull out a measuring tape and be like, oh, that's actually 34 inches, a little bit short. We're not going to do that, but this is a general rule of thumb. Just understand that the customers have been communicated. They've received the communication that we do about 3 feet up, 3 feet out. With the granule, it's just extending that barrier treatment. So the granule that we put in turf, it goes another 15 or 20 feet, just because that's typically about the width that your granule spreader will apply when you do one strip around the house. Now, if there's a customer that has a big yard and they want us to do more than that, typically we charge extra, but if it's a deal breaker for the customer and they're going to cancel because of it, we would certainly just do another couple of passes if that's what it would take to get to keep the customer. From a sales perspective, if somebody has a big yard and they want the yard done every time, the whole yard granule put down on it, then you should bid a little higher than you otherwise would have. And obviously there's guidelines in the rate card. But between the liquid barrier treatment and the granule treatment that we put down, they'll have about a 20 to 30 foot barrier all the way around the house. Now the granule product, it works really well in turf. It doesn't work in if they've got a patio, it doesn't work at all. If they've got rocks or things like that, it doesn't work very well. And so if they've got a xeriscape yard, then besides treating the foundation, you may take your liquid treatment and treat bushes if needed. So if they're having issues, like for example, they might have a bush and it's just always infested with spiders, go treat that area with liquid. If they're having a lot of issues with scorpions out in the rocks, then you'll use your liquid to go treat those rocks. Now, as you're doing that barrier treatment, one thing that you want to watch out for is anything that penetrates the house. So like this right here, this is a pipe that's, this is the gas line. It's a pipe that goes in the house. Clearly that's a point of emphasis. So where that goes into the house, there's going to likely be cracks where bugs can get in. So you want to pay special attention there. Sometimes you'll have wires or other things going into the house. Treat those areas especially well. Window wells and just around windows, especially if they have a lot of bushes. So let's say they've got this window here. Let's say they've got this great big shrub or this bush that's around that house. Well, that's clearly going to be a point of emphasis, because where there's a lot of bushes, there's going to likely be harborage for spiders, and then that window is just going to be under constant attack. Now, I'll say one other thing. Have confidence in your product. You don't need to nuke the house. You don't need to do the barrier treatment 10 times. If you have your product mixed right, a single swath with your wand creates a barrier treatment. So you don't have to do a barrier, apply it and be like, I don't know if that's enough. Do it again. I'm not sure if I'm still not sure if that's gonna be enough. Hit it again. Don't have to do that. Calibrate it correctly, and then a single swath, and that is effective treatment. That's all you need to do. You don't have to do overkill. With your granule spreader, typically you should use about 1/4 cup for a house. You want that on the lowest setting, and you want to walk at normal speed. So you don't want to go through a bag every week or 2 bags a week. It's a huge waste of product. Not that that's ever happened before, as it obviously has. But just about 1/4 cup on most houses is about what you want to use as far as granule product. Now let's go ahead and look at the eaves. With the eaves, one of the key points to the treatment is the visual component of the eaves. And so when you're doing your de-webbing treatment, you've got to do a good job. Take your time. The other thing is, be careful with your pole. It sticks out a long way, so you want to control its telescopic length as you go. If you don't need it long, make it short. And you just do that constantly as you move around the house. If you need it long, make it long for just a moment, and then when it's no longer needed anymore, then go ahead and pull it in. Otherwise, if you leave that pole 10 feet sticking behind you, you'll accidentally break a window or break something, and it won't be good. The barrier treatment, obviously customers can't see that. Once it dries, they won't know that it's been done. But this web away service, they know. So if you do a crummy job on that, they'll know. And they'll complain about it, or they're more likely to cancel their service. Now, with that said, I'm not saying don't do a good job on the barrier treatment. You need to do a good job on everything. But it's especially important with the web away service, because the customers can see if you do a bad job. So cobwebs, wipe them down. It's our policy that we get all the cobwebs down. Now, if you're doing a treatment, especially initial service, you've got a certain amount of time. If the house is so bad and it's got so many cobwebs that you can't get them in your allotted amount of time, then what you want to do is have a conversation with the customer, and you can just explain, I've got a certain amount of time and I wasn't able to get all the cobwebs down. I'll get them next time. That's okay, and here's why. A lot of spiders recycle their silk, and so I've treated those cobwebs, and when those spiders ingest, they'll eat their silk to recycle it biologically in their body. When they do that, it'll just make it that much more effective. And so what I've done is I've removed all the cobwebs that I had time to today. When I come back next time to do the follow-up, I'll go ahead and get more, and then every time we come, we'll just continue to get as many cobwebs as we can until they're all gone. Now, that's on initial service, but for services that, for customers that have been with us for more than 2 or 3 regular services, there is really no excuse to have any cobwebs on the house ever. Also, if we're in a market, actually it doesn't matter if we're in a market where we're selling against people or not, our customers, they're paying to have good pest control. Get all their cobwebs down. And it's the worst thing in the world if somebody comes along, some other sales rep from another company, they knock on the door of our customer, they're like, oh yeah, I'm with XYZ Pest Control. You guys are with Penguin? Well, one thing that XYZ Pest Control does is we don't have cobwebs like this company obviously does. So do a good job with cobwebs removal. It's critically important. Now we can apply treatment on the eaves. You want to be a little careful so that you're not just spraying the pesticide everywhere, but a surgical strike, a very focused treatment just on the eaves is effective at getting rid of spiders, and then also helping with wasp and other bugs that harborage and build up on the eaves and in the soffits around the house. So that's acceptable. You want to be a little careful, not only when doing the eaves, but also when doing bushes and trees. You don't want to just blast everything, and the reason is because of beneficials. So you've got bees out there, and you can treat the eaves, and that's fine because bees aren't going to hang out on eaves, and if they do, they're a pest. Typically, they just hang out with around flowers and things like that. So if you just do a focused treatment just on the eaves, that's fine. It'll dry there, and then it won't affect your beneficials like bees, honeybees very often. When you're treating bushes, you want to be careful. If there's any flowering bushes, you don't want to treat it with liquid. And that's just a uniform rule all across the board. If there's flowering plants and there are some sort of pests that we need to get rid of, we can use granules, that's fine, or we can treat around the bush, but we don't want to treat the flowers themselves. Again, it's for beneficial honeybees. The other thing on the inside of the house, we want to focus on places and points of entry, places where pipes and wires come inside the house and where there's holes. Every window has a weep hole. Every window that opens, at least, has a weep hole. And it's just this opening that's always there, and so bugs can find it and they can come in. That's why spiders come in and they just build a cobweb right there at the window, and that's why you find cobwebs at windows, because they came in and they just stopped there, set up shop, and said, this looks good, and here's my new home. Obviously, you can't treat windows. This window right here, even if it has a weep hole, is going to be pretty protected because of the barrier on the outside. Up here, if this window opens, obviously there's no barrier here, and so you want to treat that from the inside. Now, I understand that this window isn't going to come into as much attack. It's not going to be under as much attack because there's not a bush right here. But even still, from the inside, we want to treat that from the outside in. You just treat those window weep holes. Same thing with where pipes come into the toilets, around washers, dryers, dryer vents, sinks, vanities, in the kitchen, basically every appliance. So behind the refrigerator, there's pipes coming in there, and so you want to treat underneath the fridge. You don't have to pull the fridge out, you can just treat back behind it. Also, dust works pretty well behind things like the fridge and the washer and dryer and the dishwasher. The same thing with the microwave. If you put a little dust back there, it works pretty well. Now, as you know, we do the inside predominantly in the winter time, and not only do we treat these spaces that I just talked about, but we also treat the wall voids. But for the initial service, you'll end up doing an interior service at the time of the initial service. And the reason is simply because if somebody's starting a quarterly service, say in March, in the winter, we're going to come do a really thorough interior treatment, but they can't wait that long. We're not going to be like, hey, I know you're having bugs on the inside, but it's March right now. Why don't you just hang tight, just kind of brush those spiders off your bed, and just kind of move around them, just deal with them for now, and we'll be here in like 9 months and do the interior treatment. Obviously, that's not going to work. So on the initial service, it's our policy to do the inside if needed, and 99% of the time it is needed. So you do the interior treatment on the initial service, and then assuming that they're quarterly, then we'll just come out and do the, focus on the exterior service for the spring, summer, and fall treatments, and then we'll do the interior treatment in the wintertime, and then from that point on, that's the treatment plan that they'll have. Now with a monthly, it's a little different, because typically if somebody's on a monthly treatment, they're more concerned about pests. That's why they're on a monthly treatment. And so if that's the case, we'll do the inside as often as they'd like. And also with a monthly treatment, you may break up this treatment that you've got into different months. So with a monthly treatment, you've only got half the time essentially, as you do on a quarterly service. And so you might not be able to do the yard and the foundation and the eaves and the inside and the xeriscape area every single time. And so you might do the foundation and the yard, and the next time maybe do the foundation and inside, and the next time do the foundation and the eaves, and then the next time do the foundation and back to the yard. And so you kind of break it up a little bit, and that's fine for a monthly service, assuming that the customer is okay with it. Now I'm going to say one more thing about the foundation. It's kind of the backbone of the pest control service. I already mentioned how it keeps crawling insects and crawling bugs out, and most bugs that we deal with, most pests, are crawling, and so it creates kind of the backbone. The other thing is it's really safe for beneficial bugs, which we like. And so if you do have a monthly service and you're going to break it up, you want to do the foundation every time, so the foundation plus one other thing or plus two other things. And that way the customer with the service, they can get everything done, but they might not get everything done every time. And monthly services are typically okay with that. But again, communication with them is key. We're going to go ahead and talk about the communication at the end of the service. So after you've done a service, if you don't communicate to the customer, then they're not going to know, and they're going to not think that you did a great job. So as important as anything else is communicating to the customer what you did, explaining, I did this is what I saw, this is what I found, this is what I did, this is what you can expect, this is what I think it will do, this is my realistic expectation, my realistic hope for how long it's going to take to get control of this. This is what I plan on doing next time. This is what you can do. These are some steps that you can take. All of that communication is critical at the end of the service. Now, if the customer's not there, then you put that communication in notes visible to client. Now, I understand it's kind of a hassle to write this all down. Part of your job. Got to do it. If you got a phone, use a dictation on your phone. It'll make it a lot easier. And one other thing with the notes visible to client, be professional and use correct punctuation and correct spelling. Proofread. Don't just punch whatever in there and then hit send. Write it and then take a second and reread what you wrote so you don't look like an idiot and you misspell there or your. Like you are should be YOU''RE as opposed to your. It just makes us look really unprofessional if we can't write professionally. So do a good job with that. If the customer's there in person, be polite, be confident, explain clearly what you did. The QRH is absolutely critical. So if you miss a step, so for example, let's say you missed the step of you were supposed to call the customer beforehand and you didn't. That's a mistake in and of itself, but the bigger mistake is everyone knows that you aren't using your QRH checklist, because had you done your QRH checklist, you would have seen the step that says review account. And had you reviewed your account, you would have seen the note that said call customer before you get to their house. So the QRH is critical. Use it. Use it, use it, use it. It should be super handy wherever you can grab it on a regular basis, and you should just be using that every single day. That's all I've got.